So it's very obvious that I am not the breadwinner of the family. That's my husband. Well, when I decide to start a business and basically fund it using my parents' money that they gifted to me, he now all of a sudden wants to get involved because he's seeing how successful it is, when in the very beginning he told me I didn't even have a shot. So I pretend to play along until one day where I reach my limit and I tell that jerk this: "I've never been one to air out my dirty laundry in public. That's not just how I was raised. However, given that this isn't really something I want to turn to my family or friends for, I figured if I keep this vague enough, I might be able to get some good advice out of it. If not, I'm sure at least writing it all out will be beneficial to me. You know, venting helps people, right? I'll try to provide as much context as I can without putting up a neon sign listing out my name, address, and social. So, bear with me if anything I say seems a little unspecific. This isn't some big drama-filled rant. Nothing extravagant or outrageous prompted this post. No catchy headline can really summarize it. I'm a long-time lurker on here, and I'm an even longer sympathizer. I've read years and years worth of posts about horrible families and criminally abusive spouses. This isn't one of those stories. I almost feel guilty for needing advice in the first place because part of me is convinced that nothing's wrong, that I'm just blowing everything out of proportion, and any sane woman would be grateful to have the husband that I do, and the life that he can't afford us. Still, here I am. So I'll save you the trouble of my inner conflict and give you some context instead, right? My husband and I met when we were young. We were friends for a really long time, not particularly close, but we hung around the same circles. So we saw each other often enough. We'd both always been big dreamers and high achievers, so when high school came around and studying became something unavoidable for us, we spent more time together. It worked out well because while I would have rather been out partying with my friends against the wishes of my parents, I didn't mind studying as long as, well, I was with him. We were both incredibly driven from a young age, though I'd say that he was more naturally academic inclined than I was. I leaned towards the more creative side, but being the first-generation daughter of an Asian immigrant meant that academic excellence wasn't really an option. Studying with him meant studying more often, and that reflected in my grades, which in turn made my parents so happy. So you know what? We kept on doing it, studying together. We both graduated at the top of our class and immediately went out to separate colleges. He stayed in the state while I moved away from schooling, and we fell out of touch for a while, though we were still in all the same groups with our friends. Then, in my senior year of college, he got into contact to let me know that he was applying to law school nearby, and he would love to catch up. Well, he came down to the tour of the campus, and the meeting turned into dinner afterward, which turned into lunch the next day, which, well, turned into him visiting again and again and again. Only this time he was there to see me, not his law school. We went from barely keeping in touch to going on dates every few weeks to him renting an apartment across the hall from me, and before I knew it, he was the love of my life. Then, his dad passed away. His father's been funding his education and accommodations and was meant to do so until he got a job after law school. His mom wasn't really in the picture, and when he was an only child, his father had really poured everything into him. When his father died, he was left in a lurch. He'd wanted to be a lawyer for as long as I'd known him, and suddenly, with everything finally within reach, it was falling away. Not only had the loss of his father affected him, but he was losing his future too. The decision I made was not a quick one. I considered every possible ramification of it and every possible horrible outcome. It was still the easiest decision I've ever made. I told him to move in with me. While I could not cover the full extent of his school fees, what was left from his father's estate would get him through the majority of it. And you know what? We would figure this out, and the rest of it we will get through. I could handle our living expenses considering I just started working as an accountant. It would be tight, but we could do it. So, we did it. He moved across the hall into my tiny apartment and we became a team. I'd become an accountant less because I was passionate about the field and more because the idea of me going off and starting my own business had always concerned my parents a little bit. So I figured that if I got a good, respectable job that I could always fall back on, they would have less to worry about. I had to delay my plans a little considering my new commitment. Saving to start a business while supporting a law student was kinda difficult, but it's worth it to me. I saw my future with him, and I had faith that when the time came, he would support me too. He'd say as much when he first moved in. My parents did encourage us to get married before I spent all my money supporting a partner through school, which I now know was because they love me and want me to protect in any outcome that it may be. Given their insistence, we did eventually get married in what was essentially a courthouse wedding. A quick reception with our friends afterward, and I promised my parents that we would have a proper ceremony once we were more established. So time goes on, right? I worked as an accountant and he finished law school. He got into a great summer associate program in his second year, which really set the tone for his career. He graduated near the top of his class and was hired right away by a firm in our home state. We'd always planned to head back home, so it did not take long for us to pack up and for me to start applying for positions in our hometown. I took a bit of a pay cut to do it, but being home, surrounded by family and familiar sights and sounds, was more than enough to make up for it. I was also so happy to be next to my parents. I know it's not exactly the normal here, but I'd always wanted to look after my parents in their old age. They sacrificed so much to come here and give me the opportunities that I have. So I've always known that when the time came, I would return the favor. I'm their only child, and a lot of their family is still back in Asia. So I'm really all that they have in a way of a support system. I've always been very upfront about this with my husband, crystal clear. He knew about it before we got married, and he's always been supportive of my decision to support my parents. I never expected him to contribute at all. After all, I would be supporting them regardless of whether I was married or not, so I'd always planned to be able to do it in my income alone. As the years went by, my husband began to do quite well for himself. We moved into a more upscale part of the city. He took up more expensive hobbies that he enjoyed with his father, golfing, and he just got busier with work. I wasn't doing badly, but the opportunities for me in our hometown were a little more limited than the opportunities that he had. Had we remained in the other state, I likely would have been out earning much more than him by now. But the move had not been great for my career. Again, I didn't really mind that since accountancy wasn't my long-term plan anywho, and I valued being close to my family above all else. But my husband and I still split our bills quite evenly. After he got his first job, he began covering half of the expenses. So even when we moved into a more expensive house because he wanted to, I continued to pay for half of everything in addition to supporting my parents who had now retired. While things became more affordable for him as his income increased, my ability to support my parents and save for my personal goals was hindered. So I spoke to my husband about it a while ago, and he told me that once we were more established, he'd be able to fund anything I wanted to. But the goalpost for what he considered established seemed to keep moving up and up and up. He'd get a new watch, then a new car, then a new house, and it never seemed to end. Somehow achieving his goals always came before achieving mine. For a long time, I felt like I was being unreasonable. After all, I have a successful husband who's always pushing himself to do better, and we have a beautiful home together. I just felt like the career I'd gone into to fund my dreams and just being my backup plan had become a cage that I've been trapped in for far too long. Being a lawyer was his dream, and I'm so happy that I could help him achieve it, but being an accountant was not my dream. He knew my goals. He knew that this wasn't what I wanted for myself, and yet he made no move to even prioritize my future too. The only person I've ever verbalized any of this to was my mom, but considering I didn't want to make her feel like a burden, I was sparse with the details. Then, for my birthday, my parents gifted me a check. They told me that they sold some land back in their home country that they've been holding on to for years, and knew that they were never going to use it. And they wanted me to use the money to start my business. I was overjoyed. My husband told me that since I seemed so excited, his birthday present to me would be an investment into the company once I started it. I spent the next few months in intensive R&D for my first line of products, a lip balm line that I've been conceptualizing since I was a teenager and developing on the side for years now. I'd always been a huge fan of skincare, in particular lip care, since I live in a cold climate and was prone to chewing on my lips. This was something I had in my back pocket for years, and I finally had the money to fund it. Some time passed with me still working as an accountant and developing the brand, and finally it was ready to launch. I skipped over the thought of a physical store quite early on and knew that the e-commerce was the best way to get it up and running. The first couple of months were slow, not terrible, but not quit my job day amazing. Then a YouTube short that I posted in hopes of getting the word out went viral, and I received more orders than I know what to do with. My base of operations was at my parents' house, so my husband did not really see the true extent of how hectic it was. But he knew that I was pulling long nights at their place after work for getting everything done, and then the business started doing well enough that I was able to consider leaving my job. So I brought this up to my husband, and he told me that I should not put all my eggs in one basket. However, with the encouragement of my parents and friends, I decided to go ahead with quitting, just to focus on the business full-time. The reason I'm posting this is because my husband still is not exactly supportive of it. On one hand, I feel like I should be grateful for the life I have. On the other, I just wish he would be as supportive of my goals as I've been for his. What should I do? Should I even do anything? Should I just ignore this and hope it gets better? Is anything even wrong in the first place? Update number 1. Some people in the comment section of my original post weren't very happy with me. Of course, all the sentiments that they expressed were the very same ones that had held me back forever sharing any of this before. I know I have a good life. I know that I'm privileged to live in a nice home and a nice town with a nice man. I know that I'm privileged. I know that building up my life's goal for the whole post and then saying that I started a lip balm line isn't exactly the most exciting thing in the world. Guys, I know all that. I didn't post here to complain about my life or to admonish my husband as some irredeemable monster. I love my husband. The reason that I did everything I've done to support him is because I love him, and I knew that he was the man I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. That's not the reason I've posted here. I wrote my original post because I felt unsupported. I felt like I've dedicated years of my life to supporting him, and that I was now left with a lifetime of unachieved dreams. I don't want him to just buy me some lip balm or let me be a stay-at-home spouse. I want to chase my own goals like he chased his. Well, that being said, it's been a little while since my original post, so I do have an actual update for those of you wondering. My husband continued believing that I should go back to my previous job until I showed him around my new workspace. I'd unfortunately outgrown using my parents' house as my base of operations, so I rented out a good-sized workspace nearby that was better suited for the job. To go along with it, I also hired 2 people to work with me. One to help me with production since orders have been really ramping up, and another to focus on sales and logistics so that I can devote more time to product development and the brand's social media presence, which has really been boosting our sales. He seemed shocked that I was able to expand the business in such a way so quickly, but he was quick to return his skepticism. I don't really know what I was hoping for, but it was nice while it lasted at least, and I'm still holding on to hope that once he sees that this is a legitimate venture that's actually worth my time, he'll start getting excited about it too. I'm actually going to be hosting a little launch party soon to celebrate the new space and to launch 3 new flavors of lip balm that we've been working on. I'm hoping that having all of our friends and family around to celebrate it might make it seem more real in his eyes. I don't know. Maybe I'm just setting myself up to be disappointed by his attitude again, but I really do want to share this excitement with me. Update number 2. I did not expect this to turn into a bit of a series, but here we are. I've returned with the word of the launch party and the days following it. For the impatient ones among us, It went well, then it soured, then brightened up considerably. For the more patient readers, here's the lowdown. The party started off great. I hosted it at our home. Considering having a bunch of people in our manufacturing lab isn't the most hygienic business practice, my husband had a meeting to attend right before the party, so he joined in a little late. Before he arrived, a lot of our friends, both mine and ours, and my family arrived, and everything went amazing. A bunch of people tested out the new products I had, and they were saying such good things about it. My husband arrived about an hour into the party, and immediately he was annoyed with me. He pulled me aside to ask why some of his colleagues were there. I told him that I invited their wives, and some of whom I've been friends with for years, and I guess they tagged along. It wasn't like he wasn't warned either, considering I told him I'd been inviting my friends from a particular group chat that the other office wives were in. Even if I had not warned him, I didn't see the problem with them being there. They were having a great time. I got the distinct feeling that my husband felt that this part of my life was something he wanted hidden. My little hobby that he could indulge when we were in private, but not something he wanted to tell people about. I was so dang determined to not spend my entire party feeling sorry for myself. So I removed myself from the conversation and I mingled with the guest, as I've been doing before he arrived. He must have joined the party too, because I saw him talking to his coworkers for the rest of the night. All things considered, I had a good time, and I believe that my guest did too. I didn't have the party with the intention of selling anything to my friends and family. That feels a bit, bad to me. But I did end up with a lot of orders anyways. The next day, my husband came back from work and asked to talk. He said that a colleague of his, Leslie, who had not made it the night before, had come up to him to ask him if it's possible to reserve some products for her daughter. Apparently, a few of her classmates have been using my lip balms and are raving about it. And Leslie's daughter's been trying to order some for a while, but they kept saying sold out before she could get her hands on it. Well, my business operates on a drop system, meaning we release a drop of products on a select date, which are only available until the stock of that particular drop runs out. After my first video went viral on social media, drops started selling out faster and faster. I'd say that was primarily why I made the move to a big workspace, so I could ramp up production and have bigger drops. Evidently, my husband has been unaware that the drops were doing so well, and of the system I used to sell products to begin with. I took some time to explain it all to him and showed him some of the numbers from the last quarter. He was super impressed, and for the first time since I started the company, he was showing genuine interest in it. We went over everything about the brand, and it was like I was talking to the high school version of him who would spend hours sitting in the library with me, talking about our dreams for the future. I'm hoping that this is not a fleeting moment, and that sharing in each other's success can become something that goes both ways again. For the first time, and as long as I can remember, I'm hopeful that things are looking up for our relationship. Update number 3. I just read through my previous update, and sitting here right now, I honestly want to cry about how hopeful and earnest the final paragraphs were. See, I really believe that things for my husband and I were sincerely looking up. And maybe I could finally return to some feelings of happiness and contentment in my marriage. For a while, it looked like maybe that could actually happen. He starts showing more of an interest in the business, asking actual questions, coming down to visit the workspace, getting involved in a way that he had not been ever since I started taking the idea serious again. I was excited to share this with him. I was excited to have him by my side. He actually subscribed to the brand's social media page, which was huge since he doesn't even go on social media that often. Then he started to get too involved. He would question the way I filmed the videos. He'd have notes on the tone I used in the voiceovers. He thought the packaging could use a revamp despite it being almost brand new. He thought that the flavors we carried were limited. Note after note after note, he started getting more and more opinionated on anything and everything to do with the brand. The very same brand that he wanted nothing to do with just weeks prior. I started feeling a bit overwhelmed with the amount of attention he was paying to the business. But I held it in for a while because wasn't that exactly what I had wanted? for him to show an interest. I'd gone on multiple page rants about how I wished that he would be more involved and supportive, and now that he was finally involved, I wanted him to back off. I held off on saying anything about it just to give him some time to get used to it all. Maybe he was just excited. Maybe he just wanted to know everything there was to know about it so he could feel involved, and once he knew the gist of it, he'd calm down. Then he came into my office as I was going over some numbers for the business and asked if we could talk. Of course, I said yes. He said that he wants to talk about the company. Not your company, the company. He told me that after looking into how we ran everything, he wanted to get more involved so his suggestions could be taken into account. He felt that the way things were being run wasn't optimizing profits. I told him that I wasn't willing to lower the quality of my packaging or unfairly heighten the workload on my employees, especially since they were doing so much already. I also told him that while I appreciate his input, the final decision when it came to my business is on me, just like I did not interfere with his work. I would appreciate it if he would just not handle mine. That's when he told me that he believed that it wasn't just my company. He'd invested in it. He was entitled to a partial ownership, if not full partnership, considering he is my husband. He told me that my business was meant to be a huge failure, and it was a fluke that it succeeded, and he wanted to make sure that I did not squander it away with my silly ideas. His investment was the birthday gift that he's given me after my parents gave me a check to fund the company. I told him that by logic my parents should be the majority owners, but he told me that what they had given me was a gift, while he had specifically specified that he was doing this as an investment. I told him that we could continue this conversation once I was done with work, and this was not something that I wanted to talk about in a rush. So now I'm sitting here, still in my office, trying to sort things through with my thoughts and the finances of my company at the same time. Once again, I don't know what to do. Update number 4. Hey guys, what I've learned over the last few weeks of my life is that not knowing what to do does not mean that nothing will be done. Everything that's occurred since my last update just goes to show that the plans are not always set in stone and that we should always listen to the advice of the more experienced people around us. I thought I knew my husband. I thought I knew him in high school when we'd spend hours and hours planning out our future. I thought I knew him in college when I had him move in with me so that I could support him both emotionally and financially following the death of his father. I thought that I knew him when I married him. When we first got serious, my parents warned me against dedicating so much of my life and resources to a man who didn't owe me a thing. At any moment, he could have just upped and left. I would be left with a strain. They wanted me to protect myself, and the most straightforward way to do so at the time was for us to get married and have an ironclad prenup. The prenup came into play when my husband and I finally found the time to talk about what we had mentioned in my office. This time, instead of continuing down the path of the birthday present investment, buying him partial ownership, no, he jumped straight to wanting 50% of the company. Somehow, over the span of a few weeks, he'd gone from having no interest in my business to trying to claim half of it. I'm not stupid enough to think that it has nothing to do with the numbers he saw regarding just how profitable my business is. Maybe the lifestyle upgrade should have tipped me off. Maybe the watches, the new golf clubs, or the new house should have been signs that his priorities have shifted somewhere along the way. Maybe his priorities have always been the same and I just never noticed. In either case, money was more important to him than me. Supporting my dreams did not seem like a financial beneficial course of action, so he just did not, and I never put 2 and 2 together. I refused to hand over half the shares. It's my company. It's always been my company, and if anyone's entitled to anything from it, it's my parents who actually supported me through it all and actually invested in me. When I denied his request, he told me that either I gave him half the company or he would divorce me. He said that he had no interest in being in a marriage where one partner was selfish. Okay, well, the irony of his statement was not lost upon me. In a moment like that, I would have expected myself to break down in tears and not know what to do. Somehow, despite the maelstrom of emotions that he triggered inside me, I kept my cool. I told him that he should divorce me then, that if he didn't do it, I'd file it myself. I've been at my parents' house ever since, and I have not spoken to him in any way except to let him know that the name and number of my divorce lawyer, though I would like all the communications to occur through him. I'm going to avoid sharing too much now that this could become an actual case, but please know that I'm okay. I'm with people I love who love me back, and I will not be giving a single cent to my soon-to-be ex-husband if I and my prenup can help it. Guys, if you've read this far, thank you. All of you have been infinitely more supportive over this period of time than my own husband. Don't ever underestimate the power of a single comment. Your words have truly been my lifeline. Final update. I've never actually planned to return to this post, but I kept coming across these stories on YouTube short videos, and I was reminded of this, and you know what? You'll probably notice that it's been a hot minute since my last update, which means big things have happened. To start with, things that the most of you are probably interested in. I'm officially a divorced woman. To make a long story short, it turns out that my prenup was, in fact, ironclad. That even my lawyer's ex-husband with a bunch of his lawyer friends could not crack it. Not only will he not be getting half of my company, but he will have to pay me alimony just to make up for my diminished earning capacity while I was supporting him and therefore unable to further my career. In simple terms, as per the terms of the prenup suggested by my parents all those years ago, he'll have to pay me back for everything that I spent on him during law school. Aside from the monetary consequences of his actions, I'm surprisingly happy to report that he's suffering socially too. Evidently, being close friends with the wives of his coworkers means that office gossip spreads like wildfire. I didn't try to throw him under the bus, I promise, but friends speak to friends, and before I knew it, he was being shunned at work for trying to hustle his own wife. I thought I'd be more torn up about it, to be honest. This was the man that I've dedicated years of my life to. But somehow, someway, I didn't feel anything. I'm relieved that I'm finally free of a household where I gave and gave and gave and got nothing in return. But I don't feel bad that he's facing the consequences of his actions. To conclude, my business is doing great, and my ex-husband is probably miserable. The end. So this was one of those satisfying revenge/karma stories. It looks like OP of the story did everything for her husband, and all the comment section, they were shouting throughout the updates to leave this narcissistic jerk. But it looked like OP tried to stick it out the whole time, even investing her money early on in the relationship so her significant other can go ahead and finish his career path. I do want to know what you guys thought about this story and how it ended with OP going ahead with the prenup and then going back to get the money that she originally invested in this dude by the court. So guys, drop your thoughts down below in the comment section. I would love to hear from you guys about today's story. Maybe somebody out there's been through this. I don't know. Let's talk about it. Anyways, guys, if you do want more daily videos, consider subscribing to the channel. Also, check out my other two channels in the description below, Mr. Reddito's Stories and Mr. Reddito's Revenge. All of those channels post daily videos, so if you do enjoy these stories, you have plenty to binge on. Alright guys, have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, and of course remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya.